Indoor air is generally 5 to 6 times more polluted than outdoor air, and sometimes as much as 100 times more polluted.
It's all around us, but do you ever take the time to think about the air that you breathe and how it's affecting our brains? Unfortunately, air quality is worth paying our attention for all the wrong reasons.
The majority of candles are made out of a petroleum wax. You're essentially burning petroleum in your home.
Perfumes, candles, mold, which is a big issue for a lot of people that people don't even realize.
These are things that you can do that don't require any effort or discipline.
In 2015, pollution in the air and water are a contributing factor to more than 9 million deaths, killing more people than war, road injuries, malaria, terrorism, drugs, alcohol.
The most dangerous particles to the human brain are very, very small particles.
If you've read Limitless, I talk about the 10 keys for a limitless brain, things like a good brain diet, things like managing your stress, optimizing your sleep. And one of them that I've been talking about for 25 plus years is a clean environment.
There was a 100% improvement in cognitive function in the Green Standard building versus just a normal building that people go to work in every day.
We're spending well over 90%, the average person, inside, but you can only go a few minutes without air. And that's the importance of this conversation.
Yeah, I think mattresses are one of the worst things because, again, people don't think about it.
How air pollution could affect our brains.
The link between air quality and brain health is very, very well established.
Why is it important to pay attention to air quality now more than ever?
People who live in areas of higher pollution have much higher levels of memory problems and dementia.
What can somebody who's very concerned for their family, their team, what can they do to mitigate the harmful effects of air pollution?
The best solution is
I want to welcome you back, Kwik Brains. I am your host and your brain coach, Jim Kwik. Ensuring access to clean air, it used to be an afterthought for a lot of people, but our guest today has made it his life's purpose to raise awareness about the importance of optimal wellness foundations. And our guest today is Peter Spiegel. He is the founder and co-CEO of Ideal Living, and we'll talk about what that company is. It's a wellness company that's democratizing quality by sharing superior science-based products that provide clear air and pure water. So today, Peter joins us with a wealth of knowledge on managing indoor air quality for well-being. We'll be discussing the alarming air pollution statistics, impact on brain health, your focus, your memory, the best plans potentially that could help filter your office, your home, indoor environments. And so that will be the focus. How air quality and a clean environment affect our brain health and our mental performance. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Thank you so much for having me, Jim. I'm very happy to be here.
I've been looking forward to this conversation because this is a topic that, especially in our Facebook group, many of you, if you could search my name on Facebook, we have a private group there for our podcast listeners, about 150,000 people. And people are always asking when I talk about clean environment, where do people start? And so what I wanted to ask you as a starting conversation is, first of all, why is it important to pay attention to air quality now more than ever? And how has it changed, maybe over the past decade? And when I was listening to some of your videos, you talked about the Environmental Protection Agency talking about how there could be upwards of, am I getting this right, upwards of 500 times more pollution indoors than outdoors?
The EPA says on their website that indoor air is generally 5 to 6 times more polluted than outdoor air, and sometimes as much as 100 times more polluted.
Wow.
That really surprises people. They think, oh, I'm going to go into my home. My home is a sanctuary, and I don't have to worry about air quality once I'm inside my home. But unfortunately, that just isn't the case for a variety of reasons. First of all, if it's outside your home, it's also coming inside your home. You open your windows, you open your doors. Your HVAC systems are invented to recirculate not just indoor air, but to bring some outdoor air inside your home. So if it's outside your home, it's also going to be inside your home unless you have a completely sealed home. And then, unfortunately, on top of that, just through our daily living, we start adding things to the indoor air. I mean, if we have pets, many of us have pets and we love our pets, but then some of them shed and then that pet dander might get into the air. If we had a newer home, construction materials, unfortunately, can have many, many chemicals in them, and then they outgas those uh, volatile organic compounds into the air. We might use cleaning products. We might have a gas stove. We may have a gas dryer. We may have personal care products with artificial fragrances, which are made from petroleum products, and a very dangerous chemical called phthalates are in artificial fragrances. And many of us love to burn candles in our home. I was on a Dr. Gundry's podcast, and I started talking about candles, and they edited out that little clip on, put it on Instagram, and now 4 million people
Wow.
have heard me speak about candles. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but the majority of candles are made out of a petroleum wax. You're essentially burning petroleum in your home. They're scented with artificial fragrances. You're putting more synthetic chemicals into your home. So that's the way
Yeah.
our home becomes 5 or 6 or even 100 times more polluted than outdoor air.
Yeah, so when we're thinking about it, I mean, it's ubiquitous, right?
Yeah.
Perfumes, candles, mold, which is a big issue for a lot of people that people don't even realize that they're being affected. Cleaning products, paint, personal care, the
Yeah.
off-gassing from, new, like your new mattress, or let's say you're getting carpet or furniture.
Yeah, I think mattresses are one of the worst things because again, people don't think about it, right? They buy a new mattress. If it has an inner spring, the majority of those mattresses then are covered with polyurethane foam, which is made from petroleum, and now you're
Right.
sleeping on and these off-gassing elements. And I always recommend to people, if you're going to buy a new bed, make sure it's a natural mattress, natural latex, organic latex is a good choice. If you're going to paint your home, make sure you use zero VOC paint, not
Mm,
low VOC. And the same thing, carpeting, you can get wool carpeting. So you can make choices that create a better home environment, and then you're not introducing these things. And the best solution is prevention. It's better not to have these things in your home. And you mentioned mold. Mold is a big topic for people. And mold is something that grows naturally in nature outside of our homes. If there's uh, a storm or the humidity is high, then mold is going to go up outside in the natural environment. That's going to get into your home. There are many people who have mold allergies. They'll find that they have itchy eyes or sneezing or itchy ears or their skin is itchy. These are normal allergic reactions to mold. Then some people have this phenomenon called brain fog. You just feel foggy from mold, and maybe Jim, you know more about that than I, and you can comment on it. Then there's the mold inside of our home, and this is something again. If you discover mold in your home, either growing on a on in a wall or on a carpeted surface, you want to get that mold out of your home.
yeah.
And the other thing people often get confused about, it's we're not sensitive to the mold itself. It's the spores that the mold releases into the air that causes problems. And, some are just minorly irritating problems like the symptoms we talked about, these allergic symptoms. But for some people and some types of mold, these can cause very, very serious symptoms and even hospitalization. You want to get the mold out of your home.
So some of these symptoms are kind of obvious. Itchy eyes, sneezing, congestion, coughing could affect your sleep. On the extreme side, potentially contributing factors to lung disease or heart disease. You and I were talking before we started recording about some research you found on how air pollution could affect our brains. Maybe we
Sure.
could talk on that a little bit.
I have a company called Ideal Living. We make an air purifier called Air Doctor. Some people call me the Air Doctor, but I'm like an Air Doctor general practitioner. So I had to do some additional research to prepare for this podcast where we're going to do some more deep
Hmm.
diving into cognitive health. But I'll just talk about some of the things that I speak about often, and then we can go into some of the more deep research as we get into this. There is a lot of published science on the impact of air pollution on cognitive health. In 2020, The Lancet, which is a prestigious medical journal in England, added air pollution to one of the risk factors for Alzheimer's. So the link between air quality and brain health is very, very well established. And it's well known that people who live in areas of higher pollution have much higher levels of memory problems and dementia. So, that is kind of taking the older population into consideration. Shifting to the other end of the spectrum, there was a study done at UCLA here in Los Angeles, where I live, and it was done in conjunction with USC at their medical center. And they studied the impact on children, air pollution on children, based on how far they live from a major thoroughfare or freeway. So that was like the factor that they were looking at. And what they discovered is the kids who lived within a half a mile of a major freeway and up to 2 miles away, that they had the related decreases in actual IQ on IQ tests.
Wow.
So they saw in children that air quality has a very, very significant impact on IQ. And then these kind of studies have been done, and I'm just going to check. I have some of these studies in front of me.
Yeah, as you're looking at that, I would imagine because they're so close to traffic, right? There's these emissions that are coming from the automobiles. There's the rubber from the tires that really build up.
The pollutants that generally, happen near major roads, you have nitrogen dioxide,
Okay.
and they call it NOx, NOx. And this is known to have a very, very significant impact on cognition. It's a volatile organic compound, or VOC. Then the other things that seem to have an impact on cognition are related to the things that you just mentioned. Like, one is the tires. So as tires go on the road, and unfortunately, it doesn't matter if this is a car with a gas engine or a diesel engine or an electric car, you have the same problem. You have these very, very tiny particles that are created. In gas and diesel cars, that's compounded by the burning of petroleum products. And the most dangerous particles to the human brain are very, very small particles. And we talk about them as PM 2.5 particles. PM means particulate matter. 2.5 relates to particles smaller than 2.5 microns. And the problem with these particles is that they're so tiny, so they penetrate, very deeply into the lungs. And then from the lungs, they get transported into, our circulation system. And unfortunately, they're so tiny that they cross the blood-brain barrier and they go
Wow.
directly into the brain. And the same thing is with this nitrogen dioxide. It goes directly into the brain. So there are two types of contaminants that, as an air doctor, I'm concerned about. One is these particulate matter, and the smaller the particles, the more dangerous. Larger particles are things like pet dander and pollen and dust, and the smaller particles are usually things from combustion. It could be smoke particles or burning petroleum products. And then also you have very, very small particles are bacteria and viruses. So that's kind of the range of things that we're worried about. And then we're also worried about volatile organic compounds, which are just gases that are in the air. These are the things that we're worried about, and it's all these things have been studied. There was a study done in Barcelona, Spain, on school children, and they were measuring the differences in children who attended school in areas with very low pollution to children who attended schools not in very, very high pollution, but just like modestly worse air quality. And what they found is that there was an 18% delta, an 18% better performance in the uh, low pollution schools. And they were specifically measuring working memory. So this was a study on working memory in children. So that's a very, very interesting finding about how even very subtle changes in air quality impacts cognition.
And I really want to present this to our listeners. We're talking about all the challenges in indoors. We're spending well over 90%, the average person inside.
That's
We're
right.
taking on average, what, 20,000 breaths a day on
Yeah,
average. So it's, you know, and air quality, again, people could go, think about how long everybody could go without food,
right.
right? We could go weeks without food. You could go only a few days without water, but you can only go a few minutes without air, and that's the importance of this conversation. I know, Peter, you mentioned a nitrogen, was it nitrogen dioxide?
Yeah,
I know it's also aggravates problems like asthma,
that's right.
which is an issue for a lot of people. Let's get to some of the solutions because I just want to talk about your units,
Sure. Thank
and
you.
but before that, I know there are things that people could do like in our office here we have certain plants, as an example. So what are some of the what can somebody who's very concerned for their family, their team, what can they do, some of the simple things that they could do to mitigate the harmful effects of air pollution? And if plants happens to be one of them, are there certain air cleaning
Yeah.
plants that you personally like?
So we touched a little bit on this, which is the topic of prevention, right? So, as we talked about, if you get a new mattress, get a natural mattress. If you get new furniture, make sure that there's no synthetic materials, there's no synthetic foam in it. Same with carpeting. Use natural cleaners in your home. Don't use things with synthetic fragrances. If you have a gas stove, make sure it's properly vented to the outdoors. The same thing with a gas dryer. These are the kind of common sense things that we can do. Make sure the humidity in your home isn't too high, which is going to foster mold growth.
Mm.
In terms of plants, plants are very uplifting and they're great to have in your home. Unfortunately, they don't have a big impact
Mm.
on getting these volatile compounds out of the air. And they also certainly aren't going to do anything about particulate matter. So I think there are a few plant varieties that might be better than others. And the reason I don't talk about it is that the impact is not that significant. You'd have to have I mean, if you really love plants and you could have a greenhouse in your home and a forest of plants, I think, that would be impactful. But a pretty easy thing to do is to purchase a high quality air purifier. We manufacture air purifiers. I can tell you kind of the things to look for in an air purifier. One thing that's very important is you want to get the particulate matter out of the air. These um, and that could be larger particles like dust or pollen, and then even mold spores are fairly large particles. They're pretty easy to trap, but you also want to capture the most dangerous particles, the PM 2.5 particles. The best way to do that is with a HEPA filter. So there's a filter called standard called HEPA. It's a high efficiently particulate filter. They were actually developed during the development of the atomic bomb to capture radioactive particles. At that time, it was believed that the hardest size particle to capture was zero point 0.3 microns. So there's a standard that says a HEPA filter has to capture 99.97% of particles down to zero point 0.3 microns. But as I mentioned, there are particles much smaller than zero point 0.3 microns, ultrafine dust, very small smoke particles, and of course, viruses are 0.06 microns, much smaller than the HEPA standard. So there are filters now that go beyond the HEPA standard. We call ours ultra HEPA filters, and they remove 99.99% of particles down to 0.003 microns. That's 100 times smaller than the HEPA standard. So I suggest you look for an air purifier that has that type of filter. The second thing about air purifiers, especially the ones you find in big box stores, is if you go to the store and just take the cover off of them, you'll see that the filters are not sealed in the device, and so the majority of the air actually goes around the filter and not through the filter. So you want to make sure that the filter is a sealed system. Otherwise, you're paying a lot of money and you're just recirculating the air, in your home. Another thing that you should look for, and I'm hitting on the big things, is I mentioned earlier that there's two types of contaminants in our air. There's particles and then there's gases. So gases are not removed by HEPA or ultra HEPA filters. You need a carbon filter to do that. And a lot of inexpensive air purifiers advertise that they have a carbon filter, and then you look at it, take it apart, and you see there's like a little piece of foam material or some fabric impregnated with a little bit of carbon, and that carbon will get deactivated within 1 day of using it. So you need a very substantial carbon filter, and in Air Doctor, in our air purifier, we also have a very substantial carbon filter. And there are other things that I call the extras. You also have your extras in the way you describe important things. So some other extras include, what is the quality of the motor and the fan in the air purifier? We use something that we call a whisper jet fan. It's a DC motor. It's much, much quieter than the type of motors and fans that are in other air purifiers, because if it's too noisy, you're not going to use your air purifier. And then another very important thing is the air purifier the right size for your room? So the EPA and the Center for Disease Control recommends that you circulate the air in a room 5 times per hour. And in order to do that, you need a fairly significant size air purifier. And I can explain how do you do the calculation for your room size, but that may be a little bit too much information. So you need the right size air purifier for your room. We happen to make them in our Air Doctor in 3 different sizes. So one for big, large open spaces, one for like a large master bedroom, or one for a home office or a children's room.
This is in full disclosure. I purchased one of your Air Doctor units, or actually multiple ones, years ago.
Thank you.
And I got it at retail. So I want people to know, this is when we did our research consistently. Air Doctor, your units was just the ones we trust, right? And my family uses it. We have multiple different units, sizes, like, for our baby, we have a small unit in his bedroom, and the larger unit in our living room. Many of our teammates, have since, over the past couple of years, have purchased your units. We orchestrated and put together a special deal with your team. So if people want more information and want to get a generous discount, people could go to airdoctorpro.com airdoctorpro.com/quick. KWIK. It's airdoctorpro.com/quick. And you'll save up to, I believe, $300. So I want to thank your team for arranging that for our community.
Thank you.
Depending
Appreciate
on
it.
which units people could, well, again, we'll put the link to that and other resources, at jimquick.com/notes. So always go to the show notes. But this is an exclusive offer here for those of you listening to this would like to do your own research and have options, because we always want to provide resources, for our community. So again, airdoctorpro.com/KWIK. So highly encourage you to check that out for yourself and, for your own health and brain health for you and your family. Do you have too much to read, but too little time? Are your shelves full of books that you haven't read yet and become shelf help, not self-help? And that's why I created the Kwik Reading course. 15 minutes a day, 21 days will absolutely transform your life. Just go to kwikbrain.com/reading. Use the code podcast15 and you'll get instant access. Air conditioning. Is that something that, does that contribute in any way to air pollution, indoor air pollution, depending on what the power source is or anything else like that? Does that have any effect on health?
That's a good question. Air conditioning is something that most people have in their homes. You can either have a portable unit that's in a window. They have these things now called split systems. Many people have central air conditioning. I'll just talk briefly about central air conditioning. A central air conditioning system isn't going to contribute adversely to air pollution in your home. And in fact, it can help air pollution by keeping the humidity lower. The condenser is, squeezing moisture out of the air, and that goes outside of your home. And so the humidity in your home will stay at a lower level. The one thing sometimes people forget about is that every HVAC system, heat, ventilation, and air conditioning system, central system, has a filter, its own filter, somewhere in your home. And the purpose of that filter is actually to protect the equipment and to prevent larger particles like bigger dust particles or animal hair from getting in the system and actually damaging the system. So you need to change that filter. And you need to change it fairly regularly. So now let's talk about what that filter is doing. It's not doing that much to improve the quality of your air. There's a separate system or nomenclature related to these whole house HVAC filters. It's called MERV. So a typical furnace filter has a MERV rating of 6. It's just a number, like a standardized number. But you can get a furnace filter with a MERV rating of 13. And so I suggest, in addition to having a portable air purifier in your home, that you put the best quality HVAC filter in your home that you can. MERV 13 is like the highest standard, and that will contribute to improving the air in your home. The problem with these HVAC systems is they only change the air between 0.5 and 1 times per hour. And the filters, even though they will be more effective than a MERV 6 filter, they're still not going to get the volatile compounds out of the air, and they're not very effective at these PM 2.5 particles, but they will generally improve your air quality.
It's interesting. I just want to stress for everybody, it's just like the air you breathe matters, especially for your gray matter.
I just wanted to mention another study that was recently done. It was published by Harvard University. And I think this one tells the story of the impact of clean air, good air, on cognitive health so well. They simulated the atmosphere in a typical office building. They standardized the amount of particulate matter. They standardized the amount of VOCs, and then they compared it to what they called like a green building, a really clean building. And they tested 7 cognitive factors, like pretty much everything you can measure, in cognition, they measured. And what they found is that there was 100% improvement, 100% in cognitive function in the clean room,
Wow.
in the green standard building versus just a normal building that people go to work in every day. This just shows how immediate and profound the effect of air and volatile or compounds and particulate matter is on cognitive functioning. I'll mention one other thing, which is this isn't something that is a like contaminant in the air in a normal sense, but if you simply have too many people in like a conference room and you don't have adequate ventilation in that conference room, then the CO2 levels start going up, right? We had an incident once uh, in our office, and I have a CO2 monitor in the office, and I'm getting an alert on the phone, and I'm seeing that the CO2 levels are increasing in that conference room, and now it's over 1,000, which actually directly impacts your cognitive health. You start feeling a little sleepy, you can't concentrate. And what had happened is that the HVAC had failed on that side of the building, and it just wasn't circulating fresh air in the building. I mean, this is another thing that people can do, which is get a CO2 monitor, and keep it in your space, and then you can see if the CO2 levels are going up into dangerous areas. And this is really important in office spaces, and more important even than in your home. We've gotten so many requests for this at Ideal Living that within the next couple of months, we're coming out with a very sophisticated freestanding air sensor monitor that will measure, VOCs, CO2, all different particulate matter in the air, humidity, temperature, what's going on outside, what's happening inside. So you can stay tuned for that.
Amazing. Yeah, I was going to ask you about future plans and trends. It's just, I want to stress to everyone, I want to have this conversation because, all transformation and improvement starts with awareness. And sometimes we're inside, kind of like fish. They don't see the water because it's there all the time. And some of these invisible pollutants that are affecting our cognitive health, our mental performance, it could be the thing that's kind of holding you back. What I liked about this conversation, and I again, go to the show notes at jimkwik.com/notes to get the summary of this conversation and the links to the resources. What I like about this conversation, and specifically your units, when I was doing the research, is it's we set it to forget it. I want to make my life very easy and simple, right? Because life is very complex. At the very least, having something where you spend the most time, which for me happens to be in the bedroom, for sleeping, and where I work. And having units there where it's just set, and it's just kind of, for me, gives me peace of mind, knowing that, my family, our team, friends that we've recommended your units to, they could sleep better at night, literally sleep better at night because of it. And so, again, I encourage people to check out this generous discount. It's at airdoctorpro.com/KWIK. You could save upwards of $300 depending on which model you're looking at, and the size of the room that you're in. And Peter Spiegel, I want to thank you so much for not only having this conversation with us and sharing it, but also the work that you do.
Thank you, Jim. I've been interested in health and well-being my whole adult life. I think my life was very informed by the fact that my father, he died when he was 54. His father died when he was 54.
Hmm.
And I really wanted to discover, what I could do to change, my outcome in my own life. So,
Yeah.
I studied natural medicine in my early 20s. I studied acupuncture. At a time, it was illegal to practice it in the United States. I have been practicing meditation since I've been 18 years old. It's like this is a very important thing for me. It's not something that just happened recently. But one thing that happened to me when I was studying acupuncture, and I thought, and I do admire people who dedicate their lives, to being practitioners. For me, I wanted to be able to impact the lives of many, many more people. And over time, over my career, I developed certain skills in marketing and mass communication, and I had a certain degree of success. And then I reached a point in my life where I said, okay, I want to use these skills to uh, positively impact people's health on a very foundational level. And that's why I focus on air and water. And the thing, and you just said this, which is these are things that you can do that don't require any effort or discipline,
Yeah.
right? It takes some effort to do meditation and some effort to eat a clean diet and avoid certain foods, but you can have clean air in your home, and you can set an air doctor up and put it on the auto mode, and then you can just forget about it.
Yeah.
And the same thing if you drink pure water. We also have a business. Then you're impacting foundational things that impact your health. And that's really what my life purpose is about. And I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about this. This is my passion and my purpose. I really appreciate it.
Amazing. Amazing. I want to thank everybody who's tuned into this episode. Please share this with someone that you wish would benefit from it. Share it with a loved one. One of the most important things you could do. I think you learned something for two reasons. You learn it and how it could positively impact you, and you learn it so you could share it with other people, so they don't have to suffer and struggle. And so if this resonates with you, please make sure that you share it, that you take some kind of action on it. There is multitude of tips here. Please re-listen to the episode if you need to, or go to the show notes to get a summary. We'll have links to all the resources. I encourage people to make the investment in themselves, to get their own unit and test it themselves and see and feel the difference. And and make sure you subscribe, especially on YouTube. We put the extended version on YouTube. If you're just listening to this, join our 1.5 million subscribers there, where we put beyond the 20 minutes that we do on the audio platforms. And just search my name, you can find us there. And Peter, again, thank you so much for your work, your time, and your talent. And everybody, we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. And until then, everyone, be limitless.